Behind me stands Ilchester Tunnel, a throughway for the B&O Railroad for over a century. But for the past 80 years, it has become something far more sinister.
And the very first one that I pick up says, final solution.
A young lady identifies herself as Sophia Crane.
And then it got a little upsetting after that. Got a little bit weird. There's no cuts. There's no retakes. There's no calling for action. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that somebody is directing them.
We have the possibility that this whole thing is real. And we have the possibility that this whole thing is a largely plausible hoax.
If you're working with all these elements, you can, journalistically speaking, you can construct your own story out of whatever footage you choose to put in there.
I do not believe that this video is authentic.
I think there's some acting involved, and there's some effects involved. And I think that it's kind of disturbing that he feels that the only way to market this footage is to pretend it's real.
This has been done 1,000 times before, and we think it's a scam. I'm not the only one, it's everyone.
We're gonna take this footage to every professional in town that we can find. Ghost hunters, mythbusters. We're going to go to the radio stations. We're going to the TV stations. We're going to show the footage, and we're gonna saturate the market with this information. Then we're gonna prove to the world that Peeping Tom exists. The camera doesn't lie.
Urban legend has it that there are peeping Tom eyes lurking in the mist. Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Potluck, your everything and anything talk and entertainment TV show. My name is Laura Hartman, and I am your host. Today we have a special returning guest who is probably one of my favorite people that have ever been on the show. He's an award-winning TV and movie producer, writer, editor, and director. So without further ado, please welcome back to the show, Erik Kristopher Myers.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's really great to be back here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And we have a great reason to bring you back to talk about your new documentary called Butterfly Kisses. So tell us, how did you decide to do this documentary, which is actually a documentary about an urban legend in Ellicott City, Maryland, of all places?
Yeah, it's a very postmodern sort of film. And the last movie that I made, that I was actually here for, Roulette, was a very dark, sort of European art house, Lars von Trier sort of film. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit more fun, that was a little bit more playful, because as I'm sure you know, with independent films, you know, it's a marathon rather than a sprint. You end up working on it for several years. So I wanted to do something that was kind of fun and that spoke to a number of my interests, like I'm really, really into conspiracy theories and urban legends and cryptozoology and the paranormal. I'm a skeptic, and you know, I come at it from a skeptical standpoint, and I wanted to talk about why people believe the things that they believe.
Okay.
And the idea just came to me while I was taking a walk.
Okay, and I guess it's kind of educational as well.
Yeah, I suppose you could look at it that way.
Right. I mean, I've lived in this area since I was 13, and so I've never heard that urban legend before.
Well, there's a reason for that, and that's because it was invented for the purpose of the film.
Oh, okay.
Now, I mean, anybody that is from this region knows that Ellicott City is reputed to be haunted in just about every nook and cranny. I mean, they have ghost walking tours and things like that. Every tavern, every storefront has a ghost story or two. And this particular location that I chose for the film, which is Ilchester Tunnel, it is a functional railroad tunnel that spans the Patapsco River. It is a place that is known to local teenagers and whatnot as being haunted. So kids go up there and they scare themselves on Friday night or what have you. But there was no particular boogeyman ascribed to that location. So this was an opportunity for me to take a place that has a real reputation and give it some rules, give it some context.
Okay, because I looked it up online, and it when I was reading it, looked like it was something that had been an actual urban legend. So this is, you made this up.
I did, and that's actually part of the meta aspect of the film, which is to sort of, make the film as much of a multimedia experience as humanly possible. I wrote a number of articles about this urban legend under pseudonyms and posted them on various message boards, websites, and it kind of, has taken on a life of its own. And people are talking about it on Reddit, Creepypasta. There are paranormal YouTube channels that have done videos about it. And the movie's not even out yet, so it's kind of fun,
Right. So how did you come up with the idea of peeping Tom eyes, or and the butterfly kisses? Well,
the premise for anyone who's not seen the film is that Ilchester Tunnel, which, like I said, spans the Patapsco River. It's a tunnel that's been carved into a sheer rock face and is accessible by a trestle. The urban legend of the film is that if you go to Ilchester Tunnel and you stand on the far side of the trestle and you stare straight down the length of the tunnel at exactly midnight to 1 a.m. Without blinking once, which is, a superhuman feat that most people can't do. But if you have the strength of will to be able to stare for 1 hour without blinking, Peeping Tom materializes at the end of the tunnel. The gag is that once you've seen him, you cannot unsee him, and every time you blink, he gets one step closer and one step closer and one step closer till he's nose to nose with you. And as you're doing everything you can to hold your eyes open and not blink that final time, he reaches out with his long eyelashes, tickles your cheeks, causes you to blink, and then he scares you to death.
Right.
It's a
literally,
and it's a it's a mashup of various urban legends. It's like Bloody Mary, going into the bathroom and seeing her materialize in the mirror. Something with some rules, something that sounds like an urban legend that you would have heard on the playground when you were a kid.
Okay.
So that was the whole idea, and I thought, it would be fun because it also encourages people who watch the film or read the articles and perhaps don't realize that it is a faux documentary, that it is not a real documentary. It's sort of masquerading as one. It encourages people to maybe try to go there and to replicate that themselves.
Sure.
And of course, everyone's going to fail. They're not going to be able to hold their eyes open that long.
Right.
But again, it's for me as somebody who's into those sort of things, kind of fun to create an urban legend for a film that now is sort of in the infancy of becoming a real urban legend.
Do you think that once the film comes out, that people are going to go ahead and try that?
I'm hoping so. I'm really fascinated by false memory syndrome, and I know that was a big thing that happened in the 80s and the early 90s, where people were going to see therapists because they were having suppressed memories that, through various hypnotic or therapeutic techniques were being recovered. And everyone is susceptible to that. If you manage to trigger something in somebody's mind, the mind will perhaps fabricate a memory from youth. And because the film is, again, masquerading as a documentary featuring real people playing themselves at a real location that has a reputation for being haunted, the hope is that perhaps somebody will say, oh man, I remember that, I heard about that when I was a kid, or my brother told me about that. So I'm hoping that when people see the film, even when they get the gag that it is a fake documentary, that they will perhaps say, okay, well, that's a fake documentary, but it's a fake documentary about that real urban legend. I remember hearing about it, and it's, it's on Wikipedia or it's on whatever.
Right. So, can you give a brief synopsis, just because we kind of got into this kind of quickly and started talking about the actual part about it, the heart of it?
So the film is, as you said, it's basically a documentary about a documentary about a documentary. it's playing with the genre of found footage, which most people know began with the Blair Witch Project. Anytime you're looking at footage that is claiming to be recovered from filmmakers who are no longer with us, showing their death or disappearance due to an alleged supernatural incident. And it's become its own genre since Blair Witch, Paranormal Activity and films like that. And I wanted to play with the idea of what would happen in real life if somebody did discover boxed film canisters or video cassettes, and they thought that what they were looking at was the real thing. Nobody would believe it. It would be something that if you went out and said, "Hey, look, it's there," it's been done before. That was the whole premise with the Blair Witch Project. Is the fun meta gag that it is real, and people thought it was for a few minutes. But what would happen in real life in 2018 if somebody tried that? And more importantly, they weren't doing it to pull a hoax. They genuinely believed it. What would the reaction of general audiences, as well as skeptics, investigators, and including the person's family, if everyone thought this is just somebody's unfinished horror movie or something like that, what would happen? So I wanted to make a movie about the guy who finds the footage rather than just the footage. So the premise of the movie is basically this guy Gavin York, who is a Baltimore-based wedding videographer, discovers in his mother-in-law's new home a box filled with video cassettes. It's all about this urban legend about Peeping Tom at Ilchester Tunnel. He believes it's real, nobody else does, but he thinks he's hit the jackpot and this is going to make him millions. And so he is going around Baltimore, he is trying to authenticate it with various experts, researchers, paranormal groups, and he's just hitting obstacles along the way. And so it's a little bit about his sort of obsession and fixation on what he's doing and where that takes him.
Now, the box of film, because you show some of the film through the documentary of the documentary. Did you actually take older film and use older cameras to get any footage for that, or what did you do? Or you just took,
It was a little bit of both.
Or more like props?
We used older cameras within the footage itself, when you're seeing it. In addition to that, we used sort of last generation technology to shoot the found footage that he discovers. So the documentary that I am making about this guy, Gavin York, is all shot on, contemporary, HD sort of footage. And then the found footage that he has discovered is all sort of retro. And it was fun to play with, outdated technology. That was kind of fun.
Okay. So when did you start working on this film, and how long did it take you?
The idea came to me when I was taking a walk in late 2014. Roulette had been out for a year. I was trying to think about what I wanted to do, and like all the best ideas, it was just lightning out of a clear blue sky. And I knew what I was going to do. And so I sat down and I wrote it in 7 or 8 days.
Oh, wow.
And then I started showing it around, and we were rolling cameras by February.
So do you live in Ellicott City?
No. I live in Baltimore right now, but I grew up in that area. And so I was one of those teenagers going to this tunnel and scaring myself to death at night, and trying to research the lore of the area. And again, as an impressionable kid or what have you, I bought into it 100%. And that's, no disrespect to anybody that does believe in it. It's just my mind went into the skeptical realm, and it became more interesting to me, the sort of social constructs that urban legends and things like that, become. What is the origin of belief systems?
Right. Now, I was looking online that tunnel, and actually, I guess the train tracks there are the oldest. That's the oldest track in the country.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure since you lived there when you were younger, you'd probably be familiar with that. But that may be what brought these stories into fruition, perhaps?
Totally. And there was actually the film that you've seen and that's being released this fall is 91 minutes long. The original assembly of the film was 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
And it was a monster to try to cut down, essentially cut half off of it.
Right.
But there was quite a bit of backstory about the tunnel and the construction of it that had to hit the cutting room floor. And it's funny because that tunnel exists today because of, and not funny in the real way, but due to a major flood incident that occurred at the turn of the century.
Right.
And Ellicott City has seen 2 major disasters since then, just within the past 2 years,
right.
2 or 3 years. But one of those original flooding incidents destroyed what was then an aqueduct, and then necessitated carving this tunnel through the rock face.
Wow.
So that became part of the backstory for Peeping Tom, and that once that doorway was opened, that was his sort of entry into the world.
Okay, very cool. So let's talk about some of the actors and people that were involved in making this documentary. Did you take people that you knew from Ellicott City to add them into the film, like those kids? Or did you just handpick people that you know?
A little bit from column A and a little bit from column B, and that's largely because in order to pass this off as being a real documentary, and again, there's no scam involved here. I'm talking about it freely at this point, and people will figure that out by the time the credits roll at the end and everyone is listed. But in order to give viewers an experience where they're watching this and they're scratching their heads and going, how much of this is real? Is this fake? Is this pretend? Is this legit? Playing that game meant that I needed to very consciously create the found footage that the filmmaker discovers, and fill that out with actors who are largely unknown to film audiences.
Okay.
I wanted people from theater primarily.
Okay.
So that they would be fresh faces.
Sure.
You could suspend disbelief. I've worked with people who are recognizable from Chick-fil-A ads or Verizon phone commercials or what have you. I wanted them to be largely new faces, but then the documentary that I am filming about this guy Gavin York, I wanted to go the opposite direction, and I wanted to populate it as much as humanly possible with real people playing themselves, including myself as the the documentary filmmaker making this documentary about this guy with his documentary. So very postmodern, very, very meta, and so that portion of the film, the documentary, is filled with best-selling authors, DC 101, and this whole scene there. It's Eduardo Sanchez, the director of the Blair Witch Project. He plays himself. Lots of real people, and that again, makes the film a multimedia thing where you're able to pull your phone out and immediately Google all of these folks, and boom, there they are.
Wow.
So it was a very interesting experience to find the theater actors and essentially make the one movie, and then go out and get real people, which is a whole different directing experience, and make the second movie that is a response to the first one.
Okay. So how did you find the locations to film over there?
Largely, we filmed in locations that belong to the people playing themselves. So, if this is you being you, we're going to film where you work or where you live or what have you.
Right.
And called in a few favors. Red Brick Station is my favorite tavern in the area, and so we filmed a scene at Red Brick Station and stuff like that.
Okay, very cool. So, when in the fall is this going to be coming out, and where?
It's coming out in October.
Okay.
It's going to be DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, download, the whole nine. So, we're looking forward to that and trying to throw some kind of an event to coincide with release.
So will you push to Amazon or to cable TV?
It's gonna be. I'm still waiting on the full list. Of where it's going to be and when. But I'm thinking that it's probably going to be hitting numerous places all at once.
Okay, okay, awesome. And festivals?
Yeah, we're mostly done with our festival run. We've played, I want to say, 11 or 12 just this year, and it's gotten 10 awards, which has been really gratifying.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's cool to get festivals from the audience, from the festival, but it's much cooler to win things like Viewers' Choice Award, things like that, where it's connecting with the audience. But yeah, it's played a lot, and I think we have 4 more festivals that go straight up to release, and then after that,
then you're done.
Done.
Ah, okay, okay. So, did you do Q&As at a lot of the festivals, or all of them?
Yes.
Okay. And what kind of feedback did you get from the people?
It's been awesome. It's been really cool because people are asking a lot of the same questions you're asking, and the sorts of questions that I wanted people to ask, which is, whoa, okay, so what exactly is this movie? How much of this is real? How much of this is fake? Where did this come from? And the biggest question I keep being asked is, aside from, is the urban legend real? Because people are willing to suspend disbelief on that.
Sure, right.
But also, is there going to be a sequel? And so that's
oh,
interesting
yeah, okay,
to hear.
And will there be a sequel?
I don't know. I've got some ideas.
Okay.
I have some ideas kicking around.
Okay. Now, do you have as far as other movies not related to this one, do you have any other stuff up your sleeve?
Yeah, I have a couple of scripts in my back pocket, and I'm sort of holding off on putting anything into pre-production at this point, simply because, aside from the fact that I'm so busy with Butterfly Kisses going where it's going,
right.
I want to see what happens with it, and what happens with it, will sort of determine what my next project is.
Okay.
In terms of funding, in terms of resources, and all of that.
Okay. And speaking of funding and resources, how was it for Butterfly Kisses?
It was the first time I ever had investors.
Oh wow.
It was a very different experience. Was
that because they had seen how phenomenal Roulette was?
Yeah, and Roulette was financed on credit cards. I mean, it was very much a volunteer, film students, playing key crew roles and whatnot. And it was, for me, in a lot of ways, sort of a demo reel. It was a proof of concept. Look, if I can do this with a couple $1,000s, think about what I could do if I had some money.
Right.
And that opened a lot of doors for me and made Butterfly Kisses, possible the way that it is. I'm hoping that then the next film will be that next step up the staircase.
Okay, awesome. Very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing it in a movie theater.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So, do you think you'll open up in Baltimore?
I'm not sure. Again, I'm in that stage where I'm waiting to hear exactly what's going to happen and when.
Right, okay.
I went through the mammoth task of assembling all the components that are necessary to, give to a distributor, which is very time consuming, subtitles and all that fun stuff.
Oh, wow.
So I finally have that off my plate and had a bottle of scotch, and now I can relax.
Okay, awesome. So I know you lead a very busy life and you're a writer as your full-time job. Let's talk about your son and how you support and are very active with him and the Autistic Society.
Yeah, my son is going to be 6 next month.
Wow.
And it's funny coming back here. I haven't been here since
2011.
2011. We were talking about Roulette, and it was 2 years before the movie actually came out. But the funny thing is that when I went home that night in December of 2011, I learned as soon as I got home that I was going to be a father.
Wow.
So I always have an association with this show, with that. And my boy was diagnosed when he had just turned 2. Mm-hmm. He was developing late. He was nonverbal. He walked late, so many of these different things, and he had certain traits that were, setting off red flags for me. Not red flags, in a negative way, but rather, I need to pursue this and find out. And so he was diagnosed, and he
Did it? I'm sorry. Did it take a while to get that diagnosis? Because my niece's daughter is autistic, and that was kind of like a long process because they were kind of like, no, she's not. Yes, she is. No, she's not. Yes, she is.
Yeah,
she is.
Yeah. We took him to the pediatrician. You know, when I think he was maybe 1.5, and the doctor said, no, he's making eye contact, so he's not on the spectrum. You know, I don't think that's the full extent of things, but it was about 6 months when I started pushing, and then he was diagnosed, and he was diagnosed as I was writing the script for Butterfly Kisses, and within 72 hours of that diagnosis, he began talking. It was one of the most transformative moments of my life.
Sure.
Because you hear, you know, your child has a developmental disability, and you know he is not speaking, he is not doing this, he is not potty trained, he's not blah blah blah, and you begin sort of preparing yourself mentally and emotionally for the fact that some of these things may never happen.
Right.
And it was like having a label applied to him on some subconscious level. He just stood up and said, to heck with this, and began talking, and began counting, and began identifying letters and colors and shapes and animals and things like that.
Right.
I got him into an early intervention program very early. I was actively involved with the teachers and the doctors and the therapists. He just took off like crazy. He took off like crazy.
Wow.
He was so far beyond what I thought he was going to be able to do, and far beyond his neurotypical peers. And this was all while I was shooting Butterfly Kisses. I have a very strong association when I watch the movie now, and sort of remembering that was the day that I went home and he, you know, was doing this and learned that. And
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we're running out of time.
Sure.
And so now I'm going to have to bring you back so we can talk more about this, because you're on the board of the Autistic Society. So
the Howard County Autism Society, yes. I'm on the board of directors, and that's because I just began volunteering and doing a lot of work. It's my way of saying thank you for everything that's been done for him.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on the show.
Of course.
Appreciate it. And for those of you who just are tuning in, make sure you catch us on the web at www.potluck-online.org. And you have websites for Butterfly Kisses?
Right now, Facebook, Internet Movie Database. There'll be something formal when the film comes out.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
A young lady identifies herself as Sophia Crane.
And then it got a little upsetting after that. Got a little bit weird. There's no cuts. There's no retakes. There's no calling for action. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that somebody is directing them.
We have the possibility that this whole thing is real. And we have the possibility this whole thing is a largely plausible hoax.
If you're working with all these elements, you can, journalistically speaking, you can construct your own story out of whatever footage you choose to put in there.
I do not believe that this video is authentic.
I think there's